Alrighty, and welcome to today's webinar. We are talking about 3 ways to prepare your real estate plan this winter. My name is Jeff Nazuka. I'm the lead account executive here with Acre Value, and I'm excited to share this information with you today. Specifically, what we're going to be talking about is starting with analyzing recent land value trends. So once the harvest season wraps up right around now, and you're starting to prepare your plan for the winter, the first place to start likely is to track what trends have been happening with your land values, either your properties or properties near you. So let's go and find some of that information. After that, we'll talk about finding opportunities for potentially expanding your land holding. How do you search for properties that are out there? How do you get in touch with landowners to start that conversation? And then finally, we'll talk about actually making that plan for next season. Are you going to be reaching out to landowners? Do you need to take a look at your own properties and different soil maps, vegetation cover maps to figure out what happened, what went well, what didn't go so well this past season? So let's jump into the live demonstration. And let's say that I am a farmer for this example. I'm an operator and a landowner in Illinois. And let's take this as my subject property right here. So let's say I own about 80 acres or so. I am in McLean County, Illinois. This has mostly been farmed for soybeans and recently corn as well. Um, I've now just finished my harvest. What is the next steps for me? Let's go through that 3-step plan here to generate what my off-season land plan is going to be. First things first, let's figure out what land values have been doing in this area, right? So I am in this area here to the southeast of McLean County, mostly the east. What has land been doing in this area? In order to answer that question, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a look at the Acre Value Market Explorer. And so to get here, you can open up this sidebar and then select the Market Explorer, which is this graph here. This will take us, once selected, to a Market Explorer dashboard where we can take a look at land value trends over time. Specifically, we're curious about what's been going on this past year or so to see if there have been any changes in average per acre land value. And we want to be interested in the types of properties that are relevant to us, right? So in our example, I am a operator landowner. I'm curious in, tillable farmland. So in my case, what I could do then is to put my search for just my county, or maybe even the county to the, one county next to me. I want to make sure that I have my land values here as well to make sure that I'm looking for the right types of properties. And you have a whole host of other filters that you can apply here in order to make sure you're searching for land value trends for the right types of properties that you're searching for. So let's go ahead and run this result here. We'll take a look at just our county. We can see that land values have been steadily going up. It looks like right now there's somewhere within this 15,000 to maybe at the higher end, like a 17,000 per acre, something like that. So on average, we can reasonably expect tillable land in that area to be going for somewhere around 15, 16, 17,000 an acre. If we wanted to get more specific with our search, we could certainly do so. Again, with some of these filters on the left-hand side here, I've got options to either shrink my time horizon. I could also choose to include or exclude other properties that don't really matter to me. So again, if I wanted to really go after farmland, maybe I increase my acreage here a little bit higher to something like a 20 or a 40 acres, and then ensure that I'm going after land purely. And we could see that potentially the values here are even higher. Now we're talking into the 16s and 17s. So once we go through the land value trends in the Market Explorer, we can also see, in addition to dollar per acre land values and how they've been moving, we can also see things like how many transactions have happened recently. It looks like a lot of transactions generally tend to happen within the winter. So that's Q4 and Q1, which is why we're talking about this now. We can also see things like, how much acreage has been sold recently. So if we needed to go off of this to make some purchasing decisions, maybe a lot of land near me is changing hands. That might tell me something about a time to potentially jump in and expand my land holding. A lot of options here for you to be able to look into the trends for land values right now. Ultimately, though, trends are trends, and if we want to start the discussion about potentially buying a property or potentially looking into acquiring, what we would want to do then is to use data, evidence, right, in order to support this average value for the land that we are able to calculate. So let's go and find some data in the form of sale records that is going to help us assess and support our land value estimate here. And so we can do that in a few different ways. My recommended way is if we've already got filters available on our Acre Value Market Explorer, let's go ahead and find some of the comparable sales that the system is going to be returning us now as part of this Land Trends Explorer. And so what I can do, let's go up to map options here. Let's go to cluster. And what I'm going to do now is I can zoom in to take a look at some of the different land value uh, data points that are around my area. And so specifically, we'll be taking a look at maybe some of these here. Um, you can see as I move my mouse, each of these data points becomes an individual data point with more information attached to it. I can then select it, view details, and that's going to take me to a page where I can then see all of the land sales show up on my screen here, the ones that were used in that land trends analysis. And so this is the evidence that you're going to be using in order to generate that land value, that price per acre that either your land is worth or the land in general around you is going for right now. We can see a lot of transactions have happened recently here that are around that 16,000, 17,000 an acre, maybe up to 18 or potentially even higher. And so as far as using these to assess my land value and then make a data-driven assessment of land values, this is the easiest way you're going to be able to do that. You can use any of these comparable sales to support that land value that you generate. And you can also open up a list here as well to then just quickly look at some of the sales that we are showing on the screen here that were used to generate that per acre value. So what is my land going for? If I'm looking at farmland in McLean County, we're probably going to be somewhere within that 16,000 an acre, maybe a little bit higher, maybe a little bit lower. And that's where I would start off at as a place for assessing that land value in my area. Now, is 16,000 an acre, is that somewhere where I can justify making a purchase? Maybe so. And so in the cases where the land trends are looking good in your area, you can see that you want to expand your land holding and you want to make a decision about purchasing. The next step, I think, is to find other properties that are around you that would reasonably fit your needs so that you can actually expand your land holding by purchasing those properties. And so we've already got our data and our support information on what land values should be worth. Now let's actually take a look at the land itself, and we'll find some properties that would be relevant to you. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to flip over to my parcels here. And out of my parcels, let's go back to my subject property. Let's go ahead and find some properties that are nearby to me that would fit some of the different search criteria that I find important as a owner operator. Specifically, if I am looking at my property, in this example, I am a farmer and I farm row crop. I would want to go and find properties near me that have those same types of characteristics, right? And so let's open up a few other search filters that are here. This will allow us to then take a look at other ways to go and search for properties near us. And so What we can do here then is to search for properties based on things like their acreage, right? If I want to add a new property, maybe I'm not looking for anything smaller than 40 acres, let's say. That's a great way to get started. Taking a look at some of the properties that are on the map right now, and the current landowners, and just seeing which ones actually do fit my search criteria. If I wanted to do a search by, for example, I'm looking at farmland. So if I wanted to go after farmland with relatively high productivity index values, I could certainly do that. If I also wanted to go after properties that have been mostly cropland recently, trying to eliminate things like tree cover, eliminating easements and other riparian areas, certainly I could do that to make sure that I find properties that are mostly cropland. Um, Once I run this search here, let's take a look at what comes back. And what we should see is all of the properties that are in the county that fit these particular criteria. And once we see those properties line up and show up on the map, what we'll then do is we'll take a look at the contact information for each of those properties so that we can get in touch with the landowners. And we can also assess each property one by one to make sure that it actually fits my criteria. What we're seeing is there's actually a lot of properties in our search that are coming back. That's why the system is taking a little bit longer than usual. And so in this case, what I might do, because there's so many in my area, let's put a filter on distance. So let's do a filter by radius. This is going to allow us to choose only the properties that are within, maybe that's 5 miles from us. And we can see that this is a lot quicker of a search to join in. Now we have a list of properties within 5 miles from us. They're all 40 acres or more. The productivity index and the land use is something relevant to what I want, which is farmland generally for row crop, and it's a high productivity index. Now that we've got this list of properties within 5 miles from us, that's great. Now I know what's available, at least on the market. This is not a list of properties that are for sale. This is just a list of properties that are out there. Um, so now let's assess which of these properties would be valid for my search. To do that, I can either filter the property list a little bit further. I could also open up a list. And what that's going to do is it's going to allow me to look at each of these properties and not only see them for where they are on the map, but I can also then see the landowners for each of them as well. So let's take a look at this list here. And what this is going to do is it's going to populate the information from these properties, which are on my map now, and it's going to show them in my list here on the side. Yes. And so this is one-to-one. Each property on my map is going to show up on my list. This is probably the best way to get in touch with folks, or at least see who owns what, right? Because in my area, I can then sort this by owner name. If I wanted to talk to owners with the most acreage, certainly I could then see who owns what. Do they own more than one property? If so, how many acres is that going to be? In my case, you can see for my example, I just own the one property. And so for me, if I wanted to expand my land holding, I would want to talk to some of these other folks who have property near me. And in particular, maybe then I can pick up their land to farm it or to own it. There's a lot of people around me still according to my current filters. And so maybe as an example, I can search by properties who are owned by landowners who are out of state, right? For those folks who don't operate the land, they just own it and they rent it out to somebody. Maybe that's one way to try and find other landowners to try and contact as far as a purchasing decision. From this page, I can then rerun that search and I'll be able to see who shows up as an actual absentee landowner to reach out to. I can see there's a few here that are on my list who are nearby who are also absentee. Maybe those will be folks who I can reach out to in order to have that discussion about purchasing. Specifically, when it comes to that discussion, the next question becomes, once I have this property that I'm curious about and I can see it on my map here, how do I get in touch with this person? I see their landowner name and I see their owner address. Is that the best way to get in touch with them? What I would recommend then is to send a postcard or a nice, professional letter to this mailing address, but also Acre Value has a service where if you'd like to search for things like phone numbers or emails, you certainly can. It takes a credit to search, and credit's about 12 cents. Once you run the search, what you'll be able to see is if there is any phone numbers, emails, etc., for that particular landowner, we'll return as much as we can find in order to give you the best shot at getting in touch with the landowner. So to do so, all you'll want to do is either select the property on the map or find the property within the list view on the left-hand side here, and then search for this blue magnifying glass icon right next to the owner's name. That's going to allow you to search a national database for the owner's name, as well as phone numbers and email addresses. That way you can get in touch with that landowner as easily as possible. And I suppose the next question becomes, once I do know more about the landowners who are near me and the ones who I want to reach out to, what do I start with when it comes to the conversation with that person, right? What am I going to discuss with them? What do I need to present in order to have that conversation go smoothly as possible? And so what I usually recommend for folks who are going to start that conversation is come as prepared as possible. You'll usually want to include things like property maps in order to show the landowner exactly which property you're talking about, and also um, it'll show that you're aware of the property that you're curious about too, kind of building that rapport and showing that you are serious about a potential acquisition or discussion. In order to do so, you can simply search the property on the map here. Again, once you've had it selected, either on the list view with this checkbox or either on the map, you can then generate a full report on this property using this blue button at the top right. And that's going to allow you to aggregate all of the different maps and information that we've been able to find on Acre Value so far for this property, right? So here's our subject property. What we can see down the left-hand side here, we've got all of these different maps available for you to discuss with the landowner. So these are things like, what is the soil survey? And you can even hover over the different soil classes here. What is the soils, and also then how does it impact the value of the land? We can see that most of the property, or a good chunk of it, is made up of this soil that is extremely high productivity. Another good chunk of the property is made up of the soil that is less productive in terms of its PI. Maybe that has some impacts in terms of the property value. Similarly, is there anything to do with elevation? Is there any slopiness with the property? It looks like there are some contours here. We can see that towards the south, there are some slightly more elevated areas and to the west. But for the most part, it looks like the change in elevation is less than, somewhere around 20 feet, which is not that much over acres and acres. Additionally, things like flood hazard. Is there any flood hazard on the property? It looks like it's pretty clear, so that's great. And then finally, you want to verify your crop history. So it looks like it was most recently corn following beans, which tracks with my needs as the owner operator of property nearby to this one. Finally, in terms of its value, you want to be, naturally, if we're having a discussion about purchasing the land, purchasing the property, I would want to know what that property is worth so that I can make an offer. We went through the sale comps already, some of which are going to be included within your report already too. So you can see there's a handful of comps nearby that the system will automatically include for you. If you wanted to include the comps that we found on the previous example earlier from the Market Explorer, you could certainly do that too. Just select them on the map before you generate this report. And then once you generate the report, you'll be able to have them included within your report as well. Finally, one other piece that I've noticed can impact land values is the existence of energy in the area. In particular, if there is a property that has things like a transmission line running through it, or maybe there's already some existing wind infrastructure there, that can impact the property if it is a valid location for some development. whether you want that or not, it could impact the value, right? And so to be aware of those infrastructure in your area, we do have a tab here on acre value as well, where you can see things like where are the transmission lines near me. Are there any, oil and gas wells? Are there any wind turbines near my property that I should be aware of? And if so, is that going to impact the property value for this particular plot here? Now that you've generated the report, you'll have pretty much all of the information you need in order to generate both the land value, which would be your offer, as well as then backing up that offer with here's why I think it should be worth that value. Here are some examples of sales. Here are some examples of elevation, soil survey, and flood maps that tell me that this property is relatively flat, relatively productive. That's why I think it should be this value, and that's why I'm offering this price per acre. If you have that discussion with the landowner face to face, you could also print this report as well here. So there's an option in the top right of the acre value printout to print this report so that way you have your valuations information and your comps, you have your vegetation as well as things like soil survey elevation and all of those maps that we talked about. So let's continue. I'll let this run in the background while we're having this discussion. And then once the report is done, we'll be able to see it download once done. Perfect. So while my property report is generating, I think the last question that remains is, taking stock of what we've done. We have found land values for the area, roughly around 15 to 17,000 for farmland. We've found a property that we're really curious about. Now let's think about what my property portfolio would look like with both of those properties now acquired in it. So one thing that we can start to do is if this is a property that is of interest to me, and I want to monitor it over the course of the winter, maybe I am going to really have this buying discussion. I would start by making it easier on yourself to find that property again. Something that you can do in acre values, you can favorite a property that is something that is going to be located in your profile, which you can get to with hitting your email address in the right-hand corner and then going to account, and then it'll take you to your profile. And this favorited parcels will allow you to get back to the properties that you're really curious about that you want to revisit and track over time, right? If I'm going to be talking to Velma about purchasing this property, I want to be able to get back to it pretty quickly on acre value. Another thing that you could be doing here, if you know that you're going to be using this search quite a bit, within 5 miles of my property, I want to see properties that are over 40 acres, relatively productive for farmland and actually being used for cropland the past couple years. What you can do then is you can also save that filter by opening up the more filters option and then saving your current filter with this button down here. This would be winter 2024 farmland search Illinois. Add a description if you'd like, but once you submit, add a description. So let's go ahead and copy this. And then once you save your preset, then you can always go back to this preset option here and then select that property preset, which will be loaded in here. So you can see at the very bottom here, winter 2024 farmland research Illinois. I select it, then it'll go straight back to this particular page with those filters already running on there. Now, finally, what we haven't quite talked about yet is my property. What am I going to do with that property that I already had in my portfolio? And do I need to change anything for next season? And so let's go back to my subject property and let's take a look at whether we do actually need to change anything for this property or not. Let's clear some of my filters here. Let's go to map, perfect. Alrighty, and so here's my subject property. Let's take a look at some of the things that we can see from this past year and whether they would need to be changed for this upcoming year. So let's go back to get a full report. Instead of taking a look at a report for for the property I'm curious about over here, the one that I want to buy, I'm going to get a full report on my own property. And this is going to allow me to check for things like vegetation cover during the season. Were there any hot spots or any low spots that I need to take care of? So we've got our soil survey maps, which we can see. We also see that there's really no flood hazard on my property. Elevation, it looks like there is, maybe the remnants of a creek that used to cut through here. So there are some higher spots in the northeast and the southwest. Let's take a look at vegetation to see what happened over the course of the year. We'll let this generate and then we'll be able to see what exactly has gone on over the course of the year, and then do we need to make any changes for this particular property. Now, in the meantime, let's also go back to here. Now, before we take a look at the aerial vegetation imagery, so we can take a look at what has happened this past week or this past growing season. As we load that imagery in, let's talk a little bit about how to get started on acre value as well. So, in order to get started, there's a couple of options for you. Number one, if you want to just start with some of the basic info and tools, it depends on what information and tools you're going to want to be taking a look at. There's a few different subscription tiers for you. They're all available at acrevalue.com to go ahead and get started on something a little bit more short term. If you are a power user or maybe a commercial user, certainly reach out to Acre Value Sales for a custom quote. That's going to allow you to get things like price savings if you have volume within your subscription that you need in terms of states, in terms of maybe headcount and licenses. We have ways to try and bundle in some volume discounts there for folks who are going to be on enterprise subscriptions as well. So happy to talk about that. I'll put my contact information up at the end of this call as well, so that if you do have any questions, feel free to reach out to me directly and we can certainly cover any questions that you've got. I am noticing as well that we're close to time. So in the interest of time, let's go ahead and continue on to the Q&A. At this moment, let's open up any questions from the audience. If you do have any questions, feel free to use the chat function in the Zoom interface in order to send the questions. You can either send them to myself or you can send them to the whole audience. Okay, thanks. That's a really good question here. So one question that came through was, we've covered mostly buying so far, right? Tracking land values to then buy a property and add it to my portfolio. But what if we see selling being a viable option here as well? How do I track that and what would I do next? My recommendation for those types of instances would be, once again, let's start with what land values are going for in the area so that I know if I wanted to put my property on the market, what would be a valid land value for my property. After that, most realtors tell me that they will then do a similar property search by radius, similar to how we were doing before. But what they will do is they will classify it based on land characteristics like we did earlier. Are they growing cropland, etc. And they will try and find the highest acreage owned landowners, so the landowners who own the most acreage in that area, and they'll try and reach out to them directly to say, hey, look, I'm potentially looking to sell my land. You've got a lot of land in the area. Would you be interested in potentially buying? And there's a few ways to start that discussion. I know some realtors will send out, mailers if there is a listing to try and advertise that listing. You can also reach out to the landowner directly by searching for contact information using acre value as well. So a few different options for you on that side. Key points for selling being, let's figure out the land value so we know what to list the property for. And then let's find some landowners in the area to then let them know that you're listing the property. Okay. Looks like that's our only question so far. I'll leave this open for a few more minutes. In the meantime, let's put my contact information up here as well. So if you do have any questions or are you interested in something specific to your needs on acre value, feel free to let me know and we can certainly walk through what data is here, what data would be helpful for you, and then how acre value can kind of pull it all together in terms of the tools that are available as well. Perfect. Okay, so if there are no other questions, we're just about wrapping up time here. So again, thank you for joining us for this webinar this afternoon. It was great to present to y'all. If you do have any questions, again, feel free to reach out to myself. My name is Jeff Nazuka. This has been Acre Value's presentation on 3 ways to prepare your land for post-harvest. Thanks again for joining us today and have a great rest of your day. Bye, folks.